Kind of zoom in on the order to cash process, really. And one little aspect of the order to cash process, which is invoicing. So I'm very happy to be here. I've done this presentation, I think 2 or 3 times. It's gone from being 60 minutes to 45 minutes, and now it's like 15 minutes. So I've condensed it down. And used to say what you really need to know to get started. Now we should call it maybe what you really, really need to know to get started. And I've been accused of talking fast, and I'll have to try to do the same thing today and give you some content.
Honestly, we have time, so
yeah, no worries.
Yeah, you can talk
hopefully
slowly.
We can leave. Great.
Yeah,
and we can leave some time for questions as well. But the whole mission that I wanted to do in this presentation is to kind of give you what I wanted to have when I started out with e-invoicing in 365. My background is very technical. I'm an old developer. I worked with AX 4.0 and up to 2009, 2012, and 365. So I think I've actually enabled electronic invoicing in all versions except 2.5, which is it's not a good thing really, because it's been really like frustrating in many cases. And while some of those pain points still exist, I would have loved to have this presentation when someone gave me my first assignment in 365. Gustav, we need to enable e-invoicing for this customer. Okay, please solve it for me. So hopefully it can help some of you, at least get you started in what you need to know to start off your customer electronic invoicing journey. So our mission today is to enable electronic customer invoicing. We're going to deliver invoice to customer, hopefully understand electronic reporting, which is a bit of a stretch in the time we have here, but at least understand what electronic reporting does in this context. And hopefully, again, all implementations, and as you said as well, and everyone is kind of, all implementations and all customers are individual and have their own challenges, right? And also, I'm not even talking about markets here. My main focus is the European market, so I have a lot of knowledge of PEPAL-based formats, not so much about the US, but in essence, all implementations kind of are the same, because you need to understand, create your checklist of things you need to get answered, and then set the plan forward. And hopefully we can help out with that today. So before we jump in, a brief little history here. Again, before the dawn of time, then before 365, we had AIF-based exports in AX. A lot of these implementations with electronic invoicing were very, very time-consuming. A lot of development required. You had basically one format out, and then you need to kind of understand that format, and a lot of dialogue into integration story. It was not fantastic. It had its drawbacks, to say the least. And now, at least in Europe, there's a lot of legal requirements rolling out with the mandatory B2B invoicing in many countries. There's an EU directive. If you have trouble sleeping, you can look it up. It's EN 16931. But basically, for the European Union and many markets, it's becoming mandatory, and in many countries, it already is mandatory. So Microsoft supports this with regulatory functionality, but most of it is done through the e-invoicing functionality. And I'll look a little bit at that, hopefully. And also, it's like a hygiene factor requirement from many customers to be able to support electronic invoicing. So it's more and more. You need to at least have a plan for enabling it if you're not already there. And again, the pain points, they will always probably be the same. It's master data preparation, of course, technical solution, and varying formats and requirements across countries. For Europe, there is a format called PEPAL. It's called PEPAL BIS billing. It's supposed to be a standard format that works for all. And it kind of does, but as with standards, all countries kind of figure out their own little dialects of standard, but it's a much better way of working than it was before, where each country had their own individual format. Now we have at least one format that is nearly similar across countries, which is a great thing. So what are our tools? What are the tools that are available at our disposal? We have, of course, one of our favorite ERPs, not excluding Business Central, but I'm focusing on finance and operations here as my favorite ERP. And within 365, we have the electronic reporting framework, which is a really, really powerful tool. And if you haven't learned about it or kind of dived away from it, I implore you to look into it, and especially if you're going to use e-invoicing. We also have an add-in that can be installed. It's called the E-invoicing add-in. I have a separate segment on that shortly to understand what its purpose is in this whole story. but you need to be aware of it and you need to make a decision. So it's on your checklist of things to consider. And then we also have validation tools, and we can use Copilot a lot here. Hopefully I have some time to show you at least some examples of how we can leverage Copilot when working with these formats. Then we have something called EDI brokers. Basically, they are your friend because they can help you out, but if you don't need them, you don't need them. And then we have ISVs, which you can make good use of if you have an ISV. You might even not need electronic reporting framework, but the ISVs can help you out with a lot of these things when it comes to e-invoicing. You have a lot of more tools, but these are the main ones that you need to consider when you go into e-invoicing. Do I have an ISV that already supports e-invoicing? Do I have an EDI broker? If you're using the Peppol, for instance, you as a customer, you cannot place something on the Peppol network directly. You have to be an approved Peppol operator. So either you go through all the hoops to make yourself an operator, or you go through an EDI broker, which is the more common case. So let's go through all of these in a short segment. Let's start with the ER framework, electronic reporting. It's not really new anymore, but I say new because it's new in 365. And it has basically all of the reporting requirements for legal and statistical reporting. So in any case where Microsoft says that, yes, we are covering those legal requirements for, let's say, intrastat reporting, customs reporting, all other like formats, it's 99% it will be an ER format and an ER model that you need to work with. And basically what it does is that you have the application data, your SQL server in the backend. And then what ER is doing is creating a model, kind of a star schema on top of that maps towards the table. So you can have an invoice model that doesn't necessarily have all the field names from your tables, but it has customer, kind of a little bit like an entity, right? An DMF entity. And then the data model or the model configuration you can then reuse for many different formats. So if you have an invoice model that maps towards your invoice tables, you can reuse that model to map to Peppol format or to any format for your region that you need to use. You can also then, on top of the model, then you add something called a format. In this case, it's a Peppol that I'm going to show you, but you can add any format and then you connect it to the data model. So it's a bit of a complicated technical story here, but the key here is reusability, and low code requires some technical knowledge if you're going to customize things here and write like expressions and formats. But if you don't need a lot of adjustments on the models, you can get away without writing a line of code, basically is what I'm saying. And then the format is then outputted to either an XML format in this case, or it can be a PDF. It can be any number of formats that is supported by the framework. But basically these concepts is what you need to know, that you have a model, you have a format, and it all connects to, in this case, outbound. Then if you're going, ER can also get data in. So then you would turn it around, that you would get data into a format, such as when you get a CAMT54 file for bank statements, basically, that also goes through the ER framework, where you get the file from your bank, it runs through the format maps to the model, and the model maps to the backend application data. And that's basically what ER is doing, but then you have these thousands of different formats that you need to understand. And exactly, low-code solution in many cases, not all. It's a very powerful language that you can use, but that's where kind of the edge between functional and developer is a bit iffy. So another important thing to use when it comes to electronic invoicing is master data setup, right? It's critical because it's critical as well for regular invoicing scenarios, because if you send an invoice to a customer and you don't have your tax exempt number, you don't have the critical information that customer needs on their invoice, the customer will most likely reject it. The only difference is here in e-invoicing, it will be an automatic rejection, so you will get it faster. So master data is everything. It's also on your checklist here for things to consider when you enable e-invoicing. Do I have all the necessary data to deliver this invoice to my customer? And that can also vary between countries and regions. In Sweden, we normally use the tax exempt number to identify. So we have this national registry that we use. So we only need to pass the tax exempt number in most cases. In other countries, you have something called a GLN number, which is a kind of a barcode identifying that customer on the network. So it varies between countries, but you need to ensure that you have it. Otherwise, you won't be able to place this electronic invoice to your customer. And then again, customers might also have requirements of their own. They might require that you always send the reference. Otherwise, this invoice will not pass. So I would argue that like 60-70% of the actual work to enable e-invoicing goes into this, to ensure that we have all the necessary data in place to actually send the invoice. All the remaining steps are, depending on the market, of course, much more easy. And we can also use validational tools. And again, I'm using Peppol here as an example. I would imagine the most of the X-Rechnung format and all the other formats, they have online validation tools. But a pro tip here is actually also using Copilot for validations, because Copilot is great at taking an XML structure and just asking, okay, I did an example here. I wanted to know in the Peppol format, which column should I use to send the packing slip number? And then Copilot basically just tells me you should use this node here, and then you can use the ER designer that I'm going to show you shortly to just map that value in correctly. So Copilot is a great tool to use to help out and validate. But in the end, the final validation tool is basically your customer accepting the invoice or your EDI broker accepting the invoice. So make use of the validation tools that you have. Exactly, check with your broker, depending on which one you have. And then we have the e-invoicing add-in, as I mentioned. Basically, this is an add-in that it's what it sounds like. You install this add-in through LCS or PPAC. It goes into the Globalization Studio, and it is a kind of a microservice, but it has a lot of functionality. So when you install the e-invoicing add-in, the document is generated within ERP Dynamics, and then it's sent to electronic invoicing, which then does all of the additional steps, such as delivering the invoice to your broker, sending the invoice to an FTP server, or doing additional steps. In Sweden, the e-invoicing story is quite easy. We just need to ensure that we can send it to a broker, right? But you have countries such as France, Saudi Arabia, a lot of countries that have requirements from a centralized point of view that you need to first contact a centralized service to get kind of an approval stamp or a certificate from the government, basically, and that then needs to go back to the invoice before you can deliver it to your customer. So you have these chain of events, basically, that you need to build. You can do all of these steps in the e-invoicing add-in, and all of these markets that are regulatory compliant within Dynamics are covered, but they are covered as an importable solution into the e-invoicing add-in. And the e-invoicing add-in is not free. It is carried by a license. You need to check with your partner, what your actual cost is, but I think the list price, last I checked, is I think it's $100 or $300 for 1,000 invoices. So if you're running a few invoices, but you have a very complicated story, then the e-invoicing add-in is a perfect fit for you. If you're invoicing 20, 30,000 invoices monthly, it might make more sense to have something else. But that's again on your checklist here, things to consider. Should I use the e-invoicing add-in? And when you make that consideration, you need to understand the volumes of your invoicing. But it's a very cool tool. And it can do a lot of things. It has a last mile connector as well that can submit to the EDI Peppol network. And the drawback, if you do not have the e-invoicing add-in here, if you go back to just having electronic reporting, you can generate the document, and I will show you this shortly, but you can't really get it out of Dynamics. So you need a way to kind of send this file to your customer. And without the e-invoicing add-in, you can deliver it to SharePoint, or you can use Document Routing Agent. There are ways to get it out, but the e-invoicing add-in has the capability to put it on an Azure Blob Storage or send it as FTP, or it has much more possibilities to actually export the file. So, jumping into the demo then, enough said about e-invoicing add-in. Let's go to my immersive home, which everyone is using, I hope. So if you remember, our objective here is to, someone just gave me a PBI. Gustav, please enable electronic invoicing for company, I'm going to use Contoso here, so company USRT. And the first thing I need to do then is to go into my electronic reporting workspace. If you're old dinosaur like me, you can also go to it from workspaces, and you don't have to use immersive home. And from here, this is where you kind of configure your repositories. Now, this is my test environment, so I have a lot of different repositories. When you log into a blank environment, you will only have your Microsoft repository, which is built in. if you want to create your own, you need to set up your own repository. And we don't really have time to go through that now. But basically what you do is you go into, let's go here. You go into your repository and then you import it back to your environment. So here you have the list of all the available formats and models, if you remember what I showed you in the picture before. And this can be really cumbersome, right? I wouldn't know where to start. So that's, again, on your checklist to understand, okay, what, in this case, I know I need to support PEPL. So I can do a search for PEPL here. Right now, I know which one I need to do. So I can scroll down here. I've actually already imported this because it's a really time-consuming step. And here I can find my PEPL-based invoice. So this is a format. It will generate an invoice in the PEPL format. And ER then also tracks all the dependencies. So if I want to get this format, ER will automatically download all the necessary dependencies for me. So I only need to stand on this one and press import, which will then bring it down to my Dynamics environment. I can go to my reporting configurations, and it will pop up here in my, let's see, sales invoice, UBL, PEPL sales invoice. So that's the first step that I need to do. And from here, this tool can, you can have many hours of walkthroughs of using electronic reporting. But if you don't need to make any changes into the format, you can just download the format and you're done. Just quickly going to show you how it looks. Hopefully it won't take too long. Here you then see what I meant. Here you have the PEPL format, which is validated online. And you have these mappings here to the model itself. And then the model itself is then mapped to the Dynamics tables, such as cost invoice journal, cost invoice transactions. So you have a model which you can reuse. In this case, the model is mapped to our PEPL format. And again, you saw how many formats there were. So you need to look in your market and see which formats are supported and which formats do my EDI broker support. And then going to my accounts receivable parameters, I can then configure within my environment. I'm not going to use E-invoice add-in here. In this environment, I've turned it off. So I'm doing it a simple way. I'm going to my AR parameters and I'm selecting for my sales and free text invoice, which format do I want to use here? And if you're using credit note, you also need to select the specific credit note format. So I already selected this one. It's configured. And the remaining step is to find my customer. In this case, it's a hopefully pre-prepared E-invoice test customer that I've enriched, of course, with the necessary master data. And as long as you have, again, the correct master data here that is needed for your broker or for the invoice to be generated, on the customer level, what you need to do is to flick this little switch here. E-invoice, yes. You can also use attachments, which can basically, you can attach anything, safety data sheets. You can attach the actual invoice in a PDF format if you like. It requires some setup, but you can do it, and it will then be included in the PEPL output. But in this case, we're just doing a simple e-invoice. And if I remove this, I go to my pre-prepared open order. And if I invoice it, I need to complete it first. And this can be then, I mean, depending on your setup, normally you have batch jobs doing this in an automated fashion nighttime. What you need to be aware of is that you need to ensure that the printing is also selected here and that you're printing to something other than screen. If you print to screen, the electronic invoice will not be fired because it's kind of assuming you just want to look at it. I normally set up print archive in batch jobs to ensure that it's actually printed, because then I can also use the print archive as kind of a logging mechanism to see that everything went well. And I've actually missed some master data here, as you see. Tax must be filled in. It will generate anyway, so it's not a problem. And while this is running here, you can then monitor your electronic reporting jobs in the log here, and then you can see this is actually running. We have an old one here. We can see if we can just refresh it. Executing, and this is now ER running and doing the mapping from Dynamics tables through the model to the format, and it's done. And here we now have a working PEPAL file. Let's not go through that one. That's not good content, right? But this file is okay. You can validate this one through any online validator, and it will say, yeah, this looks good. You can send this to any customer. So you see, getting started with the actual steps, it's not a tricky process. You can get the PEPAL file working. What is remaining here to kind of get the full story is to ensure, okay, how do I now get this file to my customer? And again, that depends on your checklist, right? Do you have a fancy integration team? Then they can probably help you out and pick it up and send it to your broker. If you're already using E-invoice add-in, then that's the simple answer, use it. There are many ways to get the file out, but what has been taken away from a complexity standpoint is really going from the Dynamics data into a format that is supported by multiple markets, which is done here by ER. So that's a very big pain point removed, but there is still the issue of getting the file out to your customer. All right, so from a demo perspective, that was what I had. Let me quickly jump back to the presentation here. So again, once you have the invoicing up, I showed you before, we have the electronic reporting jobs that you can use for monitoring. You can also use print archive depending on your setup, because everything here is fired upon posting and printing, right? So when it's posted and printed, the ER report is triggered. If you have the E-invoice add-in enabled, you get a lot of more functionality here when it comes to monitoring. So if it fits your purposes, the E-invoice add-in is a great tool. And if you have integration, of course, you can always use logic apps for that. Your EDI broker will hopefully, that's the whole purpose of having an EDI broker, that they take care of sending the data to the customer, reporting back to you if the customer rejected it for some reason, or if you're missing some data. So I implore you to use EDI brokers if you can, because they are very helpful in most cases. And of course, make use of batch jobs and application telemetry to monitor not only your invoicing sending, but all your invoice posting through batch jobs. I included some references here. If you have trouble sleeping, you can read through the e-invoicing country compliance standards and mandates. But all of this is also very well documented on Learn, all the steps I just showed you. But don't be afraid to spin up an environment and try it out. You might need to do some tweaking into ER. And then I would also recommend looking at the private preview programs on Viva Engage. There's a lot of help there to get started and sort out your potential issues.